Welcome in everyone to this emergency episode of the Batfoot Podcast. My name is Damian here with Matt. Today it's a joyous day. It's a wonderful day. It is Shohei Ohtani is officially signing with the Los Angeles Dodgers day. So obviously I'm pretty excited about it. But Matt, how you doing? And what are your initial thoughts of Ohtani being a Dodger?
Um, well, I'm doing good. I've been watching. I was watching my Auburn basketball game today, and they it's fun to watch them beat a team like Indiana by 30 points. Um, but anyways, during halftime of the game, I looked down at my phone and I was like, "That's exactly how I expected it to go." Shohei Ohtani just randomly announced on his Instagram going to the Dodgers. It's like, okay. Then I saw the money and I was like, oh my God. I mean, his contract is going to be 10 years, $700 million. I mean, I can't even put that into my brain. Like that, it's an insane amount of money. But obviously, Shohei Ohtani is a great baseball player and he's an international superstar. So, obviously you can't. It's not my money. So if I was a Dodgers fan, I'd be excited about it. But it's just crazy to me. It's hard to believe, really.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say how excited I am. I mean, or was at the time. I mean, I was just sitting there on my couch, and actually, ironically enough, the first like little bit of a news that I saw that was like Otani to the Dodgers was actually Shams Charania from NBA. He tweeted out like breaking MLB news: Shohei Otani is a Dodger, and like I have his tweet notifications on. And that was actually the first one I saw, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, what? Like no, no, no. And then like then started coming all the MLB reporters ones saying that Otani announced on his Instagram, and I had to run to the Instagram and look, and I threw my phone and then started running around the house just like, oh my god, I can't believe this. But and then the money came through, like you said, 10 years, $700 million. Um, we had heard kind of through this process, especially over the last week or so, that, it was probably going to reach the 600 million mark, somewhere right around there. Maybe it was $600 million with incentives, um, you know, to get up to the $600 mark or $600 million mark. Um, I don't think anyone ever expected $700 million. And I think even if you did, you expected it to be a 12 or 13-year deal, from that aspect. So this is a massive, massive commitment from the Dodgers to Ohtani. And then Ohtani made, a part of his commitment to the Dodgers as well was he actually brought the idea to make a majority of the contract deferred money. So we aren't sure exactly what that looks like apparently or yet, but there's going to be a significant amount of money deferred off of this contract to make the present day value a lot lower. So it allows the team to have more money to consistently put a good product on the field, for now. So overall, it's just, shocking, at least shocking to me that it happened this way, especially after what we've heard recently this past week or so, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But just overall, like, a massive, massive amount of money, like a record breaking contract, obviously, but the implications that this is going to have through the rest of the market, through for the Dodgers, for what their season looks like, the rest of their free agency, it's insane. And I'm going to probably ramble on a lot of this episode because I can't even really wrap my head totally around this yet.
Yeah, it's wild to me, but kind of looking at a little bit more detail, I do agree with you that the deferred money is going to be a big deal. I'm not exactly sure how the luxury tax will work with that, because you know I don't know exactly how the deferred money does, but I think all deferred money taken out of the AAV, is that what it is?
Well, see, I'm confused on that too because I didn't think so. But yet at the same time, like Jeff Passan and people are saying that it is going to take that down. Like even Joel Sherman was just on MLB Network not that
Okay.
long ago saying that it affects the luxury tax thing to where the AAV number is going to be lower. And he said he wouldn't be surprised if it gets somewhere down into the low 50s in based with the
In
deferred money
AAV.
in AAV. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that makes sense because I'm sitting here thinking like, and I saw that first post about it, and it was saying something about that most of the salary was deferred, and I guess you just never know what most might mean. I mean, when you're looking at a $70 million contract per year, most might mean it might be $60 million of it, but it could be,
Yeah.
which I would highly doubt that Shohei would put, not get at least 30, a year right now. But that's definitely interesting, and and then I think that it's I'm still in shock that it was that high. I mean,
Yeah.
coming off of the injury and I mean, the reports of being 500, 600, maybe, there were some saying I thought it might be higher than I expected because of those reports coming out, like it's going to be high, but they just went crazy with the 700. And I think that it sounds like the bidding wasn't even very close, like
No.
because I forgot which one it was, but one of the big baseball insiders said was that that someone in another front office that was of a finalist told him it's not going to be 699. We didn't offer him 699 million. In other words, like that offer just blew everyone out of the water. So
Yeah.
definitely interesting to look at there, and yeah, it's a you know it's a big deal. It's a historic
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah. And the thing to note on this contract is there's no opt outs. It's a
Yeah,
straight 10-year, $700 million contract. So he will be a Dodger for 10 years, assuming they don't trade him. But like, what team's going to be able to take on that contract anyways?
I mean,
He's a Dodger.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, uh, coming down to it, I think this was the Dodgers. They've okay for the past 10 years they've made Shohei Ohtani their holy grail person to go after. They had to deal with him coming out of high school that his uncle talked him out of to go play professional baseball in Japan. They wanted him in 2017, but they didn't have the DH. Like they made sure, and last year they didn't do much in free agency to set themselves up for this year. They basically pulled the trump card on everyone and said, "We're just going to throw everything that we need to make Ohtani come here." Um, and one thing, I think one part of it that makes me feel a little bit the side of him pitching is Neil Elitrach, the one that did his Tommy John surgery, is the Dodgers like team physician that they send everyone to. And apparently he was like in the meetings and gave them full confidence of like he's going to be back. The surgery of this, it was there's no worry about if the second Tommy John's going to really hurt his pitching ability. So that gives me a little bit more confidence, and that might have gave the Dodgers a little bit more confidence to say, okay, well, here's $700 million, right? And the other thing of it too is, yes, we look at $700 million of what the Ohtani contract is, but I think partially what a lot of people don't account for is how much money Ohtani's going to bring in advertising, marketing. I mean, obviously jersey sales, ticket sales. I mean that's never going to hurt there. But there was talks of he would bring $20 million a year to the Angels in advertising wise, right? So that immediately makes this contract a 10-year, $500 million contract. If that's $200 million right off, which is the amount people thought he was going to get,
yeah,
right around there. And with the Dodgers power now and being in that he's now with the Dodgers brand, you could see that number go up. It might even be able to double itself. It might make it to $40 million depending on what they're able to do here, right? So there's a lot more. This contract's a lot less than the $700 million than it's being looked at for the Dodgers because of what's going to be offset it coming in. They might offset half this contract. I mean, they might offset $350 million with the branding of having Shohei Ohtani on their team.
yeah, and I was going to bring up that point too. I do not think it's double the 20 million. Basically, that 20 million number you were talking about, the way I understood it was that was kind of what other executives around the league said that they thought he meant. And the one thing to remember about that too is that there's some teams around the league that he would have been the only reason people were interested in that team. Like, if he went to internationally and stuff, like if he went to, like, the Dodgers are a national brand with or without Shohei Ohtani, and really an international brand. I mean, it's one of the biggest brands in the world. But if you go over to, like, if he went to just say like just I mean I'm not even a team that was involved, but like the Reds, like he would be the Reds brand. So I think that's one thing that he probably brings more money in that way, just in like because the Dodgers are already bringing in a ton of money. I don't know how much more money they can bring in. So but that $20 million is probably it might be a touch higher than that with it being the Dodgers, maybe 25. Um, but it basically boils down to, like you said, it boils down to about a 10-year, $500 million contract when you take out that money that has been kind of allotted for, hey, this is how much he's going to generate, which is kind of says to me that Shohei and his team kind of look through the, hey, we're gonna get the money that we're worth, and we're gonna make a team pay for my talent type thing.
Yeah.
So that ended up being the number, and I mean, it's a wild one, but it'll be interesting to see, and we can kind of move past the contract part and see where things go from here. Um, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers fill out their roster because in 2024, Shohei cannot pitch at all this year, no matter
Yeah.
what. Like, 2025, the hope is that he'll be back to 100% for 2025. And I know that the whole thing with Dr. Elitrach and everything, and he's a great surgeon. The Dodgers have a history of being able to bring pitchers back from injury. Um, you know, I think they've always done pretty well with workload management and stuff. So I wouldn't be, I think that I think there's a really good chance that Shohei comes back, but there's never a guarantee that a pitcher comes back healthy from second Tommy John surgery. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if the Dodgers, like, with the amount of money they allotted to Shohei, how much higher can they go, and what kind of pitchers are they going to look at in free agency, or maybe because of their farm system, they might go into the trade market for pitchers, I believe.
So apparently one of the Dodgers people, Vasse, who has a lot of connections within the Dodgers. I mean, he does has Roberts on all the time. He was just in Nashville with Roberts, Friedman, and all of them. He said this on his show, breaking the Ohtani stuff here, just like the last hour or so. They're still going to be super aggressive trying to get Yamamoto. They really do like him. But the thing is with the Dodgers is they were already like $120 million under the luxury tax this year. For their team payroll. I think right now their active payroll. I'm trying to see what it has
Well,
it as.
we're not gonna know because we don't know what the deferred money is for like luxury tax purposes.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say what they had, and then if we just counted $70 million where they were still at.
Okay.
Um, it says right now they are at projected total payrolls 150. Their active is 117. So 117 is what it's at, and then if we add 70, you're at what, 187?
Well, but you're gonna have the arbitration stuff too. That's what that potential is. So once you add arbitration
So
players,
158. So they're
okay.
almost $100 million under the luxury tax thing, because isn't it 250 this year?
Don't think it's quite 250.
237.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's
237.
237.
So they're at 158. Yeah, in the 70, they're at what, 128. So they're still $20 million under
Yeah,
the thing right now, and there's still some with potential trades there
yeah. And
as
there's
well that could
that,
happen.
that now that is that including the ARB guys who are gonna get, I'm sure that like Walker Bueller is gonna get a pretty hefty amount in ARB, and then Will Smith probably gonna get a pretty good bit this year in ARB. I think he's got enough service time, right? And Gavin
Yeah, that's
Lux. Gavin Lux might not be ARB yet, but
if he
um,
is, he's R1, which wouldn't
yeah,
be a lot.
yeah, it'd be pretty
Um,
low.
that's the 158 is for their estimated arbitration salaries.
Okay, so
So it's what they're estimated at
that
right
plus the
now.
70 is probably a good idea of
Yeah.
what they're at, about 230. And I mean, you're looking at the Dodgers roster now, and you've got Walker Bueller, who you feel pretty good about Walker Bueller coming off of his injury. He came up back up, and pitched in rehab assignments late in the year last year. He was pretty, he looked pretty good. Um, Before they kind of shut him down, but you look at that, and then you look at that Bobby Miller showed a lot of promise in that rotation. But beyond those guys, like they really probably need three starting pitchers. Um, so I could see him going on Yamamoto, but if they're paying him 30 million a year too, it's hard to see how much higher they're gonna go. Are they gonna run a $400 million payroll? I mean, it's hard to say. So,
No, I still think they make it. They're going to get 2 to 3 starters. If you get Yamamoto, then I think they're making a trade for
yeah,
some way an
yeah,
affordable starter, um, that's under contract at some maybe like Cease,
yeah.
who has like a little bit lower since he's on arbitration too or
Yeah,
whatever.
he's not. He's got 2 years of control. He's making. I think
Yeah,
Cease is projected at around 10 million this year.
yeah. So I could see them making, like, if they were to go make the Yamamoto deal, somebody like that, because it's undervalued there. Um, but a big part of this too is that Bueller is going to be a free agent next year.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
Otani's your replacement for Bueller. I mean,
right,
that's kind of the.
but what I'm saying is that they might be even accounting for, like, if you were to sign Yamamoto, like, okay, well, you're just giving away the Bueller money in Yamamoto
Yeah.
anyways, and you're getting him 25 years old. You get a lot more of the prime, where Bueller's going to
Yeah.
be what hit free agency at 30.
Yeah.
So it's kind of along those lines is what I'm looking at it there. But I wouldn't still be surprised if they're going to run a high payroll again this year,
Well, yeah. I mean, the
above the
Dodgers.
tax,
I was gonna say the
definitely.
Dodgers are definitely always gonna run a high payroll. I mean, they just
Yeah,
are. But
yeah.
and it's gonna be interesting too. I mean, you look at their lineup right now, and you've got Mookie, Shohei, Freddie, Will
Hmm.
Smith, but then Max Muncy's still pretty good, but there's not a lot of depth in that lineup, and you don't really that the Dodgers have all this platoon stuff that they do, and they do need to add some to their lineup and to their bench
Yeah,
as well. I mean, because right now, like if you're looking against facing a left-handed pitcher, you're going to have James Outman and Jason Hayward as two of your primary outfielders, and you're looking at like you don't have a platoon partner for either one of them. I mean, you look at maybe Miguel Vargas takes off this year, and he was a top prospect, but I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. And they've got such a high end farm system right now that I
yeah.
wouldn't be surprised to see them make that trade for a pitcher and maybe probably add some form of a like a Mark Canna type or something like that type of. I think Mark Canna's already signed with somebody or got traded or whatever. But
He's in
that type
Detroit.
Detroit, yeah, that type of player, I think that could be a good ad for them.
Yeah, I think Outman will play more every
Yeah,
day,
get
in
the seam
center this
deeper.
year.
Yeah,
Um, and then you need a right-handed, complement to Hayward, which apparently they really like Johnny DeLuca. Shown a history of hitting left-handers pretty well, so maybe they look, because he's super cheap too. Maybe they start the season with him as the platoon for Hayward in right field. But left field, they're really hurting right
yeah,
now. I mean, right now the projected starter is Chris Taylor, which you would like him to kind of just be able to be, your utility kind of play everywhere type person. And this lineup is really, really left-handed. You're
it is.
talking, you got, I think, 6 lefties right now in this lineup. The only right-handers that you have on a consistent basis are Mookie Betts and Will Smith.
Doesn't Mookie Betts have reverse splits too, or at least
Yeah,
at times he has?
at
Yeah,
times he
so
does. Yeah, but those are your two right-handers right now, right? So to me, you need to, and all the other left-handers. It's not like they're going to get rid of anyway. I mean, you got Freddie at first, Lux is short, Muncy. Then you have Otani now, and then Hayward and um, Outman. So you need to find somebody that's a really good right-handed bat that they could put in left field, that can play out there. Potentially, you'd like them to play every single day if they could,
yeah,
just to have that consistent other right-handed bat in the lineup and not have it be a platoon guy where you're trying to bounce back and forth all the time. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do moving forward that way. I would still expect them to be aggressive, but you mentioned they have a high-level farm system. I wouldn't be surprised if they find some way to trade for maybe a pitcher, but then also like some controllable position player
yeah.
that helps fill what they need.
Well, one of the guys that I was thinking, depending on how they feel about Gavin Lux coming off of all his injuries, was if they could get a Corbin Burns and Willie Adames package.
Adamas
Um,
doesn't make any sense to
but
me.
but with Gavin Lux playing short, I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Adamas being a 1-year rental,
Right. Well,
and
it's
he's
a right-handed power bat, so
yeah,
you can if up. He plays a good shortstop. If you needed a shortstop again, but if Gavin Lux is healthy, I don't think they'll do that because Gavin Lux is a guy who really needs an opportunity. Like he really needs to play. They
yeah,
need to find out what they have in him because he was such
yeah.
a high level prospect and he's come up and he's been up and down a little bit as in the big leagues. Like they need to find out what they've got in him for their planning moving forward.
Yeah, I was really going to be really excited to see what he was able to do last year because in 2022 he had that 114 WRC plus season, a 3 WAR season. I was going to be really interested to see, and then he obviously tore his ACL there, and never got to play. But I I I think they're going to give him the reins at short and just let him see from there. You still have Miguel Vargas like as your bench player that can fill in and play that, or not Miguel Vargas, sorry, Miguel Rojas. He's still going to be on there too. So uh, it's I think the move, if they do one, it has to be for like a left fielder that's a consistent right-handed bat for this team. Just it's too many lefties at this point.
Yeah.
But then obviously, like we've mentioned, that pitching staff is the starting market is where they're going to have to be aggressive here in their next couple moves, for sure. But a little bit, I want to talk about. I mean, we've heard a lot about this over the past week or so as this whole thing played out. But you know, we'll talk about how after he signs, how the will look and what we expect moving forward. But what do you think about how his free agency played out and the kind of the code of secrecy that everyone's been kind of had to be to, and then reporters kind of jumping through it, but then also saying like, well, this is bad for baseball. Like, what are your whole thoughts on that? Because I know I have some that I want to speak on.
Um, you know, I think that sometimes players want to go through things privately sometimes. It's a big decision. I think that a part of it was probably his agency wanted to wanted to drive up prices and without a ton of info floating around. That because I think that was a big deal. Like, you know, a lot of the Toronto stuff might have been even. I think the agency wanted to control everything. So they basically said we're going to hold it against teams for leaking stuff, and of course, obviously, at the end of the day, that ended up not being a thing because after the Dave Roberts comments the other day. But I mean, I think that um, I don't necessarily think it's bad for the sport that Shohei didn't want to you know, be real open about this thing. I do think it's bad for the sport that Shohei doesn't meet with the media very often, and I don't especially like that. I think it's always good to hear from your star players. You know, I wish he would, and maybe he changes that now, but I think that sometimes just not being able to, not hearing from him is, kind of sucks. I mean, even like when he won MVP, they didn't even have the press conference because they said that there was something wrong. There was some kind of technical difficulty. They didn't reschedule it. Like if there was actually a technical difficulty, then they probably would have rescheduled. Um, so I didn't love that. I mean, I think that I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the process was necessarily bad. The one thing that does frustrate me a little bit is that this whole thing has held up the market for a large portion of the offseason. And now I think teams are going to have to scramble. So I don't think it's super fair to a lot of the other players that he waited so long as kind of the big domino to go. And I mean, especially with the fact that like everyone kind of thought he was going to the Dodgers from the beginning. Now if something happened and he decided he didn't want to go to the Dodgers, then he, then maybe it would have taken this long. But it's a little bit, you know, you would have liked to have seen this happen at or before the winter meetings. In other words.
Yeah, to me, how I think about it is that he's deserved the right and he's earned the right to go through this free agency process however he wanted to, with the cone of secrecy or whatever. There was the report that they were going to hold, leaks were going to be held against teams. I never thought that was actually real, but the one part I will say is this is a massive um, the whole way the process played out was a massive, massive um, disservice to baseball. Like, as in that baseball could have used this, MLB could have used this as a way to help grow the game and make the game bigger than ever through this, because Ohtani is such the international global superstar. Um, but at the end of the day, I think that this process played out exactly how Ohtani wanted it to, how he earned the right to, and that I don't fault him for wanting to do this way. But in the end, it is baseball and the MLB to be able to grow the game and use this as like a beacon type per se to bring people into the game.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about the free agency periods that they do in other sports, and maybe doing that in baseball. I think that
Yeah.
would be a kind of cool idea to do. I don't know exactly how that would work, but um,
I mean, I think it'd be easy.
yeah,
You just basically shut it down until like
yeah,
December 1st or whatever, or,
yeah.
or
Say the
you take
month
off
of
the month of
the
December or
first two
something.
weeks of December are free agency period. Then take a break for the holidays, and then have a secondary free agency period or something,
Yeah.
like in February and in January before spring training. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's and that's probably something baseball look into, because if you think about it, we're talking about growing the game. A lot of times in other sports, that 2 week period of free agency, especially like in
Yeah.
the NBA, think about how many people are talking about the NBA in the middle of the off season
Mm-hmm.
and during
Yeah.
that week of free agency. I think the same thing can be said about baseball. Now, NFL is a little bit different just because there's not quite as much free agency. But I think baseball could really benefit from having all eyes on it for like a week in December or something. So that would be something
Yeah.
that I would definitely look at.
I mean, I wouldn't even be opposed to saying like, "Hey, we start it, and then when the winter meetings end, it's a dead period until after the new year."
Yeah,
Like that would be the thing. I mean, the winter meetings was just this week, so it would basically be that first week in December there, and then it's off for a month, and it gives everyone time to whatever, and it might create a de facto deadline where people are wanting to sign before that, so they're not waiting until after the new year trying to figure out where they have to go in 6 weeks, um, or whatever. So the way that it all played out, I think we should probably jump into what like yesterday was an eventful day on social media. I think we should probably talk a little bit about that and how that kind of thing and how the reporters have played this before we move on to what this looks like for the market here. Um, so it had been evident here. The finalists really came down to what everyone thinks is it was the Angels, Dodgers, and kind of the Toronto Blue Jays, which kind of came out of nowhere the past, I'd say, week and a half, I would say. I know they ended up having a meeting with him Monday at their spring training complex in Dunedin, Florida, and then really like since Wednesday, I feel like it had kind of really shifted to the Blue Jays were kind of the favorite here. Everyone said they were really stepping it up, and then yesterday there was reports that he was, which take this for what it was, he was flying from Anaheim to Toronto to go there, and everyone's like, oh, well, he's signing with the Blue Jays. He has a contract with the Blue Jays. We'll come to find out he was just in his house in Newport Beach, never even left. And then, nobody really knew what was happening. Reporters were saying both ways what was happening. It's just incredibly, incredibly weird. And I think this kind of needs to shed a light on how baseball reporters, especially, use free agency and how agencies and teams use these reporters as like mouthpieces to spread their disinformation around.
yeah. I mean that report, you know, sometimes sometimes when things are real secretive, um, sometimes you get erroneous reports. You might have one guy that thinks he hears something from somebody, and that person was watching FlightAware or something like that.
Yeah.
And and then in the rush to report something, be the first, so you get the clicks. You report something that ends up being false. I mean, it happens all the time. And you hear things sometimes that are true, and then they end up not being true. Like, I think last year when Heyman reported the judge to the Giants, think that basically what happened was there was a lot of optimism in San Francisco that they were going to get him, and someone told Heyman from them that said, "Oh yeah, we got him," and Heyman took that to believe like they actually like had officially signed him when they really hadn't. I think that sometimes you've got you get stuff like that, but I mean that whole flight thing was weird. I mean, why would Shohei be riding on a plane to Toronto without having announced I'm going to the Blue Jays? I mean that would just be weird. So um, definitely, and the Blue Jays being involved in this was always kind of a weird thing too, in my opinion. I never really understood it totally.
Yeah, I never understood it from the fact of like how their team construction and how, everyone says that Otani's all about winning and longevity of winning and that. And I mean, there were already kind of people speculating and even some Toronto people, like if they sign Otani, like they've tried to sign Vlad and Bo Bichette to extensions and haven't really came close to those yet. Like they potentially have to trade one of them at least to even have a chance to extend the other one. It was just super weird. I never understood that totally. And if for everyone saying how comfortable Otani is and how much of a creature of habit he is and all of that, and having himself move from his house in Newport Beach and the Southern California lifestyle and just everything where he's already got accustomed to the past, 6 years to go to Canada and live there. Basically, it's like it made no sense in the end. So anyways, so let's move on to what it kind of does for the market now. I mean, you talked about, it kind of felt like Shohei Ohtani was holding up the market. People were trying to figure out what it was going to do. The pitching market, especially with Ohtani not being able to pitch this year, but people were still kind of interested in that. And then Ohtani was kind of holding up Yoshinobu Yamamoto's market a little bit. So as we look forward to this next week or so, week or 2 weeks kind of on the market, obviously everything's going to pick up in general, but what do you think about what the next couple weeks looks like for the market and what that, who's the biggest benefactors now?
Yeah, well, I think that the market's about to go up. I think that if you look at I think after the Shohei move, I think the big thing is I think there were probably three or four, maybe five other teams that, did believe that they wanted to save at least save the money for the time being in case they were able to land Shohei. Because I know, Toronto, the Angels, and the Dodgers ended up kind of being the finalists, but I do think the Cubs were still in on him to a certain level, and maybe the Giants and maybe some other teams. Who knows? There's been mixed reports on who all was actually involved and whatever, but I think that some teams were probably holding their money, and these free agents understand that, and they know that some teams were not sure what they were going to do, so they want the full demand of hey, they want the full supply of teams to go to, and now there's probably three or four teams who are real eager to. They've got $50 million they had earmarked for potential Shohei, and now they've got that money to spend. So you look at you look at Cody Bellinger, like he could be a guy that is close to coming off the market because now you've got now you got some teams like Toronto, you've got the Cubs, you've got some teams that really need that left-handed outfielder that maybe had some money earmarked for Shohei Ohtani that now that money's free and Cody Bellinger might be the guy that they turn to. I think definitely some of the DH guys like JD Martinez, Jorge Soler, some of those guys are going to be in that running too. And then just pitching, like you say. I mean, I think that teams, like I say, I think the market was held up a little bit because nobody knew how much money that they were going to have to spend, and the teams knew, and players knew that too. So, you still got Blake Snell out there, Jordan Montgomery, Kershaw won't pitch most of the year, but um, you've got Marcus Stroman still out there. I don't think the pitching market's held back quite as much as the other markets, but definitely interesting thing to look at. I think that the trade market might have been held up a little bit too. Teams not sure that like for example, I know the White Sox kind of pulled back Dylan Cease the other day, saying, "Hey, we're just going to let things play out for a little while before we really get back involved in moving him." And I think the reasoning behind that was just like who's going to be desperate that needs somebody now. And I think that's a big deal for a lot of these teams. So I think the market's about to move pretty fast. I think that you're going to see, over the next week or two before Christmas. I think probably quiet down for the week of Christmas, but before then, I think you'll see, a few of these bigger name guys. I would imagine you'd probably see a couple of pitchers. Maybe Jordan Montgomery ends up going pretty soon. Maybe Marcus Stroman or some of these kind of mid-level pitchers, like Giolito, maybe. I don't really think. I think Snell will be one of the last ones, but
Yeah.
because I don't think he's going to value his market like teams are. But I think some of these other guys who it's kind of clear what they are, um, like Jordan Montgomery. It's kind of clear that he's a good mid-rotation starter that you can rely on to pitch a lot of innings, and he's a good postseason performer. Like everyone knows who he is. So I think that you look at some guys like that, but I don't think teams are going to be very. I think the Snell will probably be the last one, but a lot of these pieces. I mean, we're starting to run low on free agents now too. I mean, you got Nola is gone, Sonny Gray is gone, Eduardo Rodriguez is gone, now Otani's gone. Um, you know, I think that a lot of the markets are going to start to move a little bit, and it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the market explode. I mean, like you mentioned, I think here in the next week or two, we're going to have a rash of moves. You're going to see teams like the Blue Jays. They were all in on Otani, and then they were also in on the Juan Soto trade stuff, which obviously we'll talk about all that on Tuesday. But they didn't get either one of them. I mean, do they pivot to a Bellinger and re-signing Chapman? The Giants now missed on Otani. Do they go Yamamoto and Bellinger or Chapman? I mean, you got teams that are willing to spend big money having missed on Otani, and then obviously the best player on the trade market is now gone too. So it really comes down to what are people going to do, and I think you're going to see a lot of teams kind of scrambling and making some upping their offers and trying to make some moves pretty quickly before their secondary targets start coming off the board.
Yeah, I want to make one more point about the whole free agency thing, and I think that I don't think it's going to be very. I don't think it's going to be very. I don't think it's going to be talked about all that much. But I think that free agency is going to be very difficult for the next couple of years.
Yeah,
And I think that you look at guys like Juan Soto in free agency. I think I don't think that the Shohei contract is really gonna move where value is. I think Shohei is a one, with the historic nature of his game and the international appeal of his game as well, being with the Japanese appeal. I think that he's a one man thing,
yeah,
and I think that some of these other players who are thought of as generational type players like Juan Soto are going to sit back and think that they're in that same realm when they aren't.
yeah.
And I think that you're going to see it's going to be really interesting to see how those free agencies go in the next couple of years because Juan Soto is going to be a big one and he's already turned down $400 million. So, but I don't think he's going to get $700 million unless he takes like 15
No,
years or something. He's not going to get that much money. So, but he might think he should because he thinks I'm the best. One of the best players in the game, just like Shohei is. So, it's going to be hard to say what he does, but I could see him maybe get 500 if he has a great year this year. But that's kind of the thing to look at going forward too. Just how are free agents valued at this stage? Because I do think that Shohei, like we talked about earlier, has that extra marketing appeal to him that a typical, really, really like a typical superstar player doesn't have that same marketability. They obviously bring a lot of marketability, and you do make a lot of revenue off of them, but they don't have the same thing as Shohei. So
right.
I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with a guy like Juan Soto and there's probably a couple others coming up. I don't off the top of my head I can't think of who else it is, but I know there's a couple others coming up too. But that's going to be something very interesting to look at here in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. This does not affect the top of the market for years to come, in my opinion. It shouldn't, just because of like you mentioned, who Ohtani is and the ability that he has to potentially play both ways. Where he's basically getting paid as like the top of the level for both sides of the ball there. But Soto will be an interesting one, but we'll talk plenty more about him on the episode coming up this week. But is there anything else that we want to wrap up on the Ohtani, the free agency market? Anything else?
I don't think it's anything that we won't talk about on Tuesday. I think we'll probably avoid the Otani thing for the most part on Tuesday since we've done this episode. But there have been some other moves. Eduardo Rodriguez. There was the Jamer Candelario move. I think that Jason Hayward didn't happen in the last week or two, but
Did
we talked about it on the last episode, didn't we? The Jason Hayward.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, and
Yeah.
you know, you had. Yeah, I'm sure there'll probably be some more too. So,
We have Eduardo Rodriguez, Soto, this.
yeah,
We have enough.
Yeah.
We have enough
Oh
moves.
yeah, Craig Kimbrell signing. That was
Kimbrel,
another
yeah.
one that happened. So
Yeah, we'll probably let David hit on his Ohtani thoughts on Tuesday.
oh yeah, for sure. But just we're doing our main Ohtani talk today, so
Yep. We won't ramble on for 40 minutes on that episode about Ohtani, I promise you. But anyways, thank you guys for tuning in to this emergency Shohei Ohtani to the Dodgers podcast, and I believe we will record on Tuesday night.
Good? Yeah, we should.
Yep, Tuesday night. So look for it out on Wednesday.